Hey guys, tonight we drift into a story soaked in silver light, where myth brushes against the edge of sleep and the stars seem just close enough to whisper to. You're lying under a vast sky, warm breeze on your skin, when a ripple passes through the heavens. A god has stirred, and not just any god, the moon himself. Chandra, the luminous wanderer of the night, is about to fall in love, not with another deity or a celestial power, but with something far more dangerous, a mortal heart. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And if you're listening from somewhere magical, like a balcony in Mumbai or a quiet meadow in Yorkshire, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air feels thick with jasmine. Your feet glide across soft grass, dew-beaded and cool as glass beads. Somewhere a peacock murmurs. Somewhere else a conch shell sounds, though no one holds it. You look up and there he is. The moon. Not just a glowing disk, but a being. Chandra. With a face like burnished silver and eyes that seem carved from opal and milk. He hovers above you, regal, lonely, amused. He knows you're watching and he doesn't mind. In fact, he seems relieved. After all, it's not easy being adored by oceans and ignored by everything else. Night after night, Chandra glides across the sky. You drift with him, coasting the winds. Below earth turns rivers wrinkle. In his reflection, lovers promise things under his glow, and wolves howl just to flirt. Chandra sees it all, every tiny moment, but always from above, and that's the problem. Because eternity, it turns out, can get a bit dull. Yes, you're divine. Yes, your chariot is pulled by 10 white horses, or sometimes an antelope, depending on the version you ask. But still you can only shine from a distance, never touch, never taste, never rest in someone's arms and sigh without it turning into a monsoon. So when Chandra sees her, well, it's like every poem ever written about longing gets rewritten in one heartbeat. But we're not there yet. For now he watches and waits. Down below, fireflies swirl around banana leaves. You can smell ghee lamps burning on temple steps. The earth is a velvet stage and Chandra overhead is the spotlight, or perhaps the actor who's forgotten his lines and just stands there glowing awkwardly. Now here's your first historical fact. The moon in ancient Hindu cosmology wasn't just a floating rock. It was a being with power over plants, emotions, even fertility. Farmers planted crops according to his waxing and waning. He wasn't decorative, he was essential. That's why people prayed to him, feared him, and even blamed him for particularly emotional Tuesdays. Quirky tidbit time. In some villages, brides would be asked to glance at the moon before their wedding night to absorb calmness, which honestly is asking a lot from someone who just rode a nervous elephant in full makeup for 7 hours. But here's where things stir. Chandra, god though he is, begins to feel something suspiciously human. Boredom. A restlessness. Maybe even a little ego. He's admired, yes. Revered, yes, but never chosen. And that hits different. So one twilight he does something unexpected. He lingers, doesn't just pass over the sky like a well-behaved deity. No, he slows down, hangs low over a mountain ridge and just watches. And that's when he sees her, Rohini. You don't see her clearly yet, only the way Chandra sees her first, as movement, as a melody winding through a grove of flowering trees, as the only color in a black and white dream. He's hooked. Historians still argue whether the Chandra-Rohini love story originated from early Vedic texts or was added later by poetic schools trying to personify natural phenomena. Doesn't matter.
You're not reading scripture tonight, you're floating inside a feeling, and this feeling, it's dangerous because gods aren't supposed to have favorites. That's rule number one in the divine code of conduct, probably etched into some scroll under Mount Meru. But Chandra, he's about to throw that rule into the Ganges and follow his heart. You feel it, don't you? That sharp inhale, that delicious dread. Above you, Chandra shines a little brighter. Not for crops, not for tides, but for her. Just her. And somewhere deep in the universe, something clicks. A gear shifts. A domino leans. The moon god is no longer drifting. He's diving, and you're falling right alongside him. You trail behind him now, Chandra, the moon god, as he moves through the sky, but not like before. Gone is the smooth, detached glide of a deity keeping watch over the world. Tonight there's a hesitation in his path, a slow spiral like someone circling a house before knocking on the door.
He's glowing more than usual, not in a metaphorical way literally. His light spills over treetops and lakes like milk from a careless hand, and you can feel it, that flutter in his chest that he doesn't want to admit is there. Gods don't get butterflies right, except this one does. From his place in the night sky, Chandra's silver gaze searches. His eyes are wide, curious, soft with longing. He's supposed to be attending a divine assembly in the sky, some scheduling nonsense involving Saturn's retrograde and the rebirth of a particularly moody river goddess, but no. He's here instead, waiting, watching, and there she is again, Rohini. She walks among jasmine trees, ankle bells faint against the cicadas. Her laughter isn't loud, but it lingers like incense in a closed room. She tosses her head, and a strand of hair sticks to her cheek. Chandra watches this, and the stars dim themselves politely to give him privacy. Now here's your historical moment of clarity. In the Vedic tradition, Chandra wasn't just a god, he was also an astronomical marker associated with the nakshatras or lunar mansions. The moon passed through 27 of these constellations, each represented by one of Daksha's daughters. A neat little cosmic calendar. But what the Vedas didn't prepare for was what happens when one daughter gets preferential treatment, which is exactly what's unfolding. Rohini is the brightest of them all, ruled by the star Aldebaran, and long believed to be the most beautiful. Even the sages who compiled the Rig Veda kind of fawned over her. So it's no real surprise that Chandra, wandering through his 27-night cycle, pauses again and again at Rohini's threshold. He's not subtle about it, not even trying. But gods have their own rhythms, right? Well, not this time. This time he lingers too long, stays too bright, and the others notice. The other daughters, Ashwini, Bharani, Kritika, each with their own, shine their own starry domain, start murmuring. Why does he linger there? Why is her night warmer? Why is her moonlight softer? And now comes your quirky tidbit. Some folklore says that villagers would track which nakshatra the moon was in before making big decisions. If it rested in Rohini, it meant romantic blessings, but also a risk of obsessive choices. Basically great for love spells, bad for marriage proposals. Made after 3 drinks? Back in the sky, the whispers turn to accusations. Favoritism, they cry. Indignity, says one. Astrological misconduct, shouts another. Probably. Kritika, she's always dramatic. And Chandra, he just keeps staring. You can almost hear him sigh, his face softening, each time Rohini turns her head. It's painfully obvious he's not just enchanted, he's smitten. The kind of moon-eyed poetry reciting, "Do you think she likes me?" Smitten, that even mortals recognize. Up in the divine court, things are beginning to heat up. Daksha, their father creator, disciplinarian, master of cosmic order, is not amused. He built this lunar schedule for balance, equal time, equal attention. It's not supposed to be a celestial dating app. He sees Chandra's favoritism as a disruption of harmony, a wobble in the planetary system. He's old school, big on order and hair-trigger curses, but Chandra can't stop himself. You watch him drift lower in the sky, his glow now pooled in Rohini's courtyard. The other sisters are in shadow. Earth is bathed unevenly. Even the birds, confused by the excessive moonlight, begin chirping at 2 a.m. somewhere in a palm tree. And the scholars, historians still argue whether this story was meant to explain the lunar phases or if it was an early attempt to reflect power dynamics in polygamous courts. Either way, the metaphor was clear. You can't love one without hurting another, especially when all your partners are stars with feelings. Chandra, for all his celestial wisdom, doesn't see the trap tightening. He just feels warmer when Rohini smiles. He doesn't care if her smile throws the heavens out of sync. Love has made him stupid. But you get it, don't you? You've stayed too long at someone's door before. You've waited for one more glance, one more word, even when you knew it might cost you. Chandra's divine, yes, but in this moment he's also deeply, dangerously human. And so the moon continues to hover, too bright, too close, too obvious. You float just behind Chandra, now tracing his path like a ribbon in the breeze. Below you the world is shifting. Birds are waking too early. Flowers that usually bloom at midnight are confused, opening wide at dusk. Somewhere a farmer curses as his lotus field refuses to close. In the moonlight, you watch it all with a smile, because you know why it's happening. Chandra isn't following the rules anymore. He's circling Rohini like a moth to a scented flame. And now you arrive with him at a place that barely touches the earth, a sky garden suspended between realms. It's Daksha's court where the 27 daughters reside. They're not mortal women. They're embodiments of Lunar Mansion's cosmic beings braided with starlight and time itself. Tonight they dance. You hover at the edge of the garden. The ground beneath your feet is made of silk clouds. Silver lotuses bloom mid-air. And in the center of this floating celestial mandala, the daughters of Daksha whirl. It's a hypnotic sight. 27 dancers in unison, each spinning in their own rhythm, yet somehow remaining in harmony. Anklets chime in ancient rhythms, arms paint spirals in the air, and jewels catch Chandra's light like galaxies caught in glass. He watches, and so do you. But then there's Rohini. She doesn't try to outshine the others. She's subtle. Her steps are softer, her smile gentler. But every time she turns her eyes, flicker toward the sky, toward him, toward Chandra, and there it is. That tiny moment, they lock eyes, just for a breath. But the whole garden feels it, even you. The rhythm stumbles, anklets miss a beat. Kritika nearly trips, and the sisters, oh, they see it now, they see everything. Here's your historical fact. The concept of 27 nakshatras is foundational to Vedic astrology, where each one spans roughly 13 degrees of the celestial sphere. Each daughter symbolizes a unique cosmic quality. Rohini in particular was linked with abundance, fertility, and beauty traits so beloved that ancient Indian calendars were often timed with her phase. But right now, beauty is about to cause a divine scandal. The dance ends, the sisters glide to stillness, their expressions tight. Even their veils seem less airy. They bow to the sky in practiced reverence, but some of them linger just long enough to glance no glare at Chandra.
He has not descended, not yet, but his attention has. And that alone is enough to insult them. You can almost hear the hissing beneath their smiles. Again one mutters. She batted her eyes, says another. Did you see him blush? Says a third. And so begins the whispered rebellion of the sisters. Not with fire and thunder, but with silence, with cold shoulders and clipped words, their once flawless dances begin to fracture. One accidentally steps on Rohini's sari during a ritual. Another refuses to speak to her at morning prayers. It's subtle, but venomous. Your quirky tidbit for the night. In some regional retellings, the 27 sisters weren't always jealous. Some were genuinely supportive of Rohini. But over time, village storytellers turned them into a celestial sorority of spite because, well, drama makes better bedtime stories, doesn't it? Still, one thing remains consistent across all versions. They go to their father, Daksha.
A creator deity with the temperament of a tax auditor and the creativity of a sculptor. He likes things tidy, scheduled. No celestial rebellion. No moon gods playing favorites with his daughters. You feel the shift in the air as they approach him. He listens, brows furrow, beard bristling with cosmic dust. And when they finish their tale with just enough trembling voices and tearful nods to stoke his fury, Daksha doesn't hesitate. He stands. His voice, when it booms, cracks comets in half. "Bring me the moon," he says. Historians still argue whether this conflict represented real concerns among early astronomer priests about lunar irregularities. Some scholars see it as a metaphor for power distribution. In royal courts, too much affection for one queen often meant unrest among the others. But here, in this timeless sky, you're watching it unfold like an opera lit by stars. Chandra doesn't flee. He appears before Daksha with the calm of someone who's seen galaxies born and unmade, but he underestimates one thing: a father's pride. Daksha's anger is more than divine, it's personal. To dishonor one daughter is to shame them all. To shame them all is to question his legacy. And so, with a raised hand, Daksha speaks a curse that changes everything. Chandra's glow begins to fade, not all at once. That would be merciful. Instead, it dims like a dying candle, a soft retreat into shadow. You reach out, helpless, as his silver skin grays, his eyes dull, his aura shrinks. He tries to speak, but his voice is swallowed by the heavens, and you just watch, heart in your throat. The moon god who dared to love has been condemned. The sky is not what it was. You tilt your head upward, expecting the usual silver glow. But tonight, the heavens look bruised. Chandra's light, once generous and gleaming, now wavers like a dying lantern in a storm. You can feel the change. The air seems heavier, shadows fall too early. Even the trees, those ancient gossipers, stand still, as if unsure whether to rustle or weep. Chandra has been cursed, and oh, what a curse it is. Daksha, the ever-punctual cosmos accounting, father of 27 daughters, didn't just dim Chandra's beauty out of spite. No. He weaponized heartbreak with precision. He decreed that Chandra would lose his glow night by night until nothing remained but a cold, blank face in the sky, a ghost of a god, harsh, absolutely. But to Daksha, justice isn't measured in mercy, it's measured in balance. One daughter favored means 26 betrayed. The math must be corrected. You find Chandra curled into himself, far above the earth. His usual radiance is now barely a glimmer, like moonlight trapped under water. He doesn't speak. just watches his hands fade into grey. I didn't mean... He tries, but the words trail off like mist. He had meant it, of course. The love, the lingering, the soft glow that lingered a little too long on Rohini's face. But not this. He hadn't meant for the world to suffer. Because make no mistake, the world is suffering. Here's your historical fact. In ancient Indian agrarian societies, moonlight was critical. Farmers planted by its rhythm, water cycles followed its phases, certain medicinal herbs were harvested only under specific lunar nights. So when the moon started behaving strangely when it waned too early or vanished unexpectedly, it sent entire communities into panic. And now the panic begins. You drift down toward Earth. The rivers seem slower, the tides don't rise, mango blossoms drop unopened. Somewhere in a field near the Ganges, a farmer lights incense and mutters, "Why is the moon shrinking, Amma?" His mother shrugs fear thick in her eyes. Pray harder. Prayers rise like steam, but they hit the sky and fall back unanswered. Meanwhile, Chandra continues to fade, and here comes your quirky tidbit. In a few fringe folk tales, children were warned that if they stared too long at the moon when it was dark, they'd lose their dreams. It wasn't meant to be poetic. They literally believed the moon was a reservoir of dreams, and when it dimmed, nightmares took over. Chandra, poor thing, has no idea how much havoc his broken heart is wreaking. But the gods, oh, they notice. You're suddenly swept to the great celestial Sabha, a divine council chamber shaped like a spinning wheel. Vishnu, Brahma, Indra, Agni, even the sun god Surya, gather in glittering silence. Each deity sits on a floating lotus. Each has something glowing, flaming, or levitating around their heads, because apparently, even in divine crises, no one misses a chance to flex their auras. They argue loudly. Daksha overreached, says Agni, flickering irritably. This curse affects the sacred calendar. Chandra broke a sacred bond, says Surya, folding his fiery arms. Brahma rubs his forehead and mutters something about needing a better HR department in the cosmos. Vishnu, as usual, just watches, silent, calculating, possibly doing the math on how many rituals will now be mistimed, and Shiva, not here, not yet. Historians still argue whether this divine council was a metaphor for Vedic astronomers wrestling with irregularities in the lunar calendar. Some believe it reflects early debates about reconciling solar and lunar timekeeping, a debate, by the way, that made at least one poor priest shave his head and swear off mangoes. But we're not in a dusty temple, we're in the sky where cosmic protocol is unraveling. Back on Earth, things get stranger. Fishermen can't predict the tides. Night travelers lose their way, lovers delay their weddings, and temple astrologers, they start burning their star charts out of frustration. Chandra, for his part, drifts in limbo, half lit, half lost. You follow him one night as he returns to Rohini. He shouldn't. He knows it. But heartbreak has its own gravity. He hovers over her garden, smaller now, pale as mist. She steps outside holding a clay lamp. Her face softens as she looks up. You came. I always do, he says. She smiles, and in that moment his glow strengthens just slightly, just enough to light the tips of her fingers. And that's when you realize his power isn't entirely gone. Not while she remembers him. Not while he returns. Love, even cursed, can glow. But will it be enough? That remains to be seen. You drift beside Chandra, who now carries himself like a ghost of his former grandeur. His light pulses faintly, a flicker, a memory, a half-hearted promise. He rises each night out of duty more than desire, tracing the sky with a dim outline of his former self. And still he returns to Rohini every time. You follow him one night to her courtyard, and this time she doesn't wait. She's already outside, sitting cross-legged beneath a frangipani tree, her eyes reflecting what little light he can muster. "You shouldn't come," she whispers. "I can't help it," he says. And there it is, the fatal line that ruins gods and mortals alike. But you're not alone tonight. Others are watching too, the sisters, all 26 of them. You see them from a distance, perched on their own celestial platforms, cloaked in darkness and indignation. What began as wounded pride has hardened into bitterness. They were once keepers of the moon's balance. Now they are its critics, scorning their sister from afar. You can almost hear them muttering incantations, tapping divine fingernails against stone, planning something that sounds eerily like vengeance, light, TM. And while they stew, Earth continues to suffer. This is your historical fact. Ancient Indian rituals, especially the yagnas, were precisely timed to lunar phases. A disappearing moon meant mistimed ceremonies, failed harvests, and panicked priests. Some temples even delayed major offerings, fearing divine disapproval from a sky that had gone off script. So the people, they notice. You drift down again, this time into a quiet village. A woman kneels at a shrine, her palms pressed to the earth. Chandra, she prays, don't leave us in the dark. Beside her, a child lights a tiny oil lamp, holding it up toward the sky. So he remembers where we are. Even the animals seem to feel it. You pass by a pond where frogs usually sing under moonlight, but tonight the silence is thick. A bull, once docile, kicks at his enclosure. A parrot mutters Chandra's name like a forgotten mantra. But above it all, Chandra keeps fading. Enter the gods again. They're getting restless. Vishnu has already adjusted the cosmic spreadsheet. Brahma's drawing new timelines with increasingly large quills. Agni's set 3 scrolls on fire in protest, and Surya is trying not to say "I told you so," but failing spectacularly. Still, there's one god they haven't consulted yet. You feel it before you see him. The air changes, slows, thickens like honey left in the sun. Shiva, the ascetic, the destroyer, the wild card. He appears on Mount Kailash, seated on a tiger skin mat, crescent moon already tucked behind his dreadlocks like a casual accessory. And you realize that moon, that sliver, that's Chandra. A piece of him preserved by Shiva himself, because unlike the other gods, Shiva likes complicated. He listens to the other gods argue, sipping from a skull-shaped cup with the patience of someone who's seen entire galaxies implode from poor communication. Finally, he raises a hand. Silence falls like snow. He speaks. "I will take him," he says, not as punishment, not as a gesture of pity, but as a lesson. And here's your quirky tidbit. In many regional versions of this myth, Shiva placing Chandra on his head was said to cool his infamous temper, hence the moon as a natural calming agent. So yes, the god of destruction wears a piece of the moon like a forehead, cold compress. Now comes the compromise. Shiva won't lift Daksha's curse. Cosmic law is still law. But he will soften it. He will allow Chandra to return, not all at once, not forever, but in cycles. This is how the waxing and waning of the moon is born. Chandra will diminish, but he will also rise again. He will die each month and be reborn. The cycle becomes sacred, predictable, bearable. Historians still argue whether this cycle was merely a mythologized explanation for the lunar phases or whether it also served to encode philosophical truths about impermanence and renewal. Either way, you have to admit it's a poetic fix. You see Chandra kneel before Shiva now. Not broken, but changed. "I will rise," he whispers. "Yes," Shiva says, but not all at once. You follow Chandra as he returns to the sky, dimmer, yes, but pulsing with purpose. He passes over the earth. The frogs begin to croak again. The river stirs. Somewhere a temple bell rings, and Rohini. She looks up and smiles, because he came back, because he always will. Tonight you rise with Chandra, not in full glory, but with a glow reborn. It's the first time in nights that he seems more like himself, even if it's just a sliver of light brushing the edge of the sky. You're floating just above the treetops as he begins his ascent. You can feel it. The rhythm has changed. The curse hasn't vanished, but it's become a cycle now. A pulse, a pattern, a story written in silver across the heavens, waxing, waning, dying, rising. This, you realize, is how myths become calendars. Down below earth is catching on. Priests tilt their heads, farmers squint into the twilight. Something is different. Something is returning. Here's your historical fact. The Hindu lunar calendar, or Panchang, still follows this very cycle. Months are divided by the waxing Shukla Paksha and waning Krishna Paksha phases of the moon. Major festivals like Holi Diwali and Mahashivaratri are all calculated based on Chandra's path through the sky. So, in a way, every modern celebration is still whispering his name. But that doesn't mean things are peaceful just yet. You drift toward Rohini's home again. She's waiting. She always is, but tonight something's changed. She senses it before she sees him. The air feels lighter. The jasmine blooms earlier, and then she sees it. A glint of light, a sliver of her love. She runs to the balcony, hands pressed together, eyes wide. And there he is, still dim, still delicate, but alive. You feel her joy like a warm wind, and Chandra hovering above shines just a little brighter in return. But not everyone is thrilled. Let's be honest, 26 sisters don't just forget an interstellar scandal overnight. You float past Ashwini, who's still muttering favoritism under her breath. Kritika's drawing passive-aggressive mandalas in her stardust diary. Mula just straight up stopped attending family rituals. Their jealousy has simmered, not vanished. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some ancient astrological manuscripts, Rohini was so beloved by Chandra that her star was sometimes depicted slightly off the zodiac belt, as if she were stepping out of line to catch his gaze again. Some later scholars tried to correct this anomaly, but the myth had already taken root. Back in the celestial court, Daksha is not pleased. He watches the waxing moon with pursed lips and narrowed eyes. He knows he can't undo Shiva's intervention. It's sealed in cosmic law, but he isn't ready to forgive. Not yet. Still, he's a god of protocol, and Chandra is following the new schedule. So for now, Daksha simmers in dignified silence, the way all grumpy father-in-laws do when they've been overruled by more powerful in-laws. Meanwhile, the mortal world adjusts. You find yourself in an ancient forest clearing where a group of sages sits cross-legged, mapping Chandra's new cycle onto palm leaf manuscripts. They chant and scratch numbers, recalibrating their rituals. This could work, one murmurs. Better than before, says another, holding up a bronze water vessel to catch the moonlight. Historians still argue whether the mythology of Chandra's rebirth was created to explain the natural lunar cycle, or whether it emerged as a theological metaphor for karma and redemption. Either way, it's stuck, and now you're watching it unfold in real time. And oh, the rituals you pass through a village preparing for Purnima, the full moon night. Women line the rivers with clay lamps, children paint their foreheads with sandalwood paste and turmeric dots. In the temples, priests wave camphor flames in clockwise circles, chanting Chandra's 108 names. Yes, he has that many. You'd have a long business card too if you ruled over dreams, dew, and digestion. But even among the ceremonies, there's a new awareness, a softness. They don't just worship him for light anymore, they worship him for returning. You float back to the sky. Chandra is almost halfway full now. His crescent smile has thickened confidence creeping back into his gaze. He visits each of Daksha's daughters one by one, staying equal lengths of time. He doesn't linger at Rohini's home, not officially, but you see it, that flicker, that pause, the way his glow lingers on the trees near her window just a moment longer than necessary. She sees it too. They don't speak, but in silence they love. And sometimes that's enough. The night smells of sandalwood and secrets. You glide beside Chandra, who tonight gleams with renewed confidence. His light stretches wider, silvering the surface of rivers and threading between temple spires like a quiet promise. But beneath that glow, there's tension. You can feel it in the sky. Chandra is almost full now, just a sliver away from his peak. The curse hasn't vanished, but the rhythm of his rise has restored a fragile balance, one that not everyone is thrilled about. You hear the murmurs first, not from the mortals below, not from the gods above, but from the sisters. They're gathered again, this time in Daksha's hall. Draped in celestial silks, they move like constellations in motion, beautiful, cold, and deeply annoyed. He pauses too long at Rohini's gate, one says. His time is the same, insists another. But his light is warmer there. You slip through the chamber, careful not to disturb the divine bickering. These are not the jealous tantrums of youth anymore. These are well-rehearsed grievances from ageless beings who've had entire epochs to sharpen their bitterness. They turn to Daksha again. And this time he doesn't simply wave them off, he stands, and the temperature drops everywhere. Here's your historical fact. Daksha, in Hindu mythology, was one of the Prajapati's progenitors of the universe. He was a creator, yes, but also a judge. Order was his obsession. His legacy depended on the structure he built, not just of families, but of cosmic law. So when that structure wobbled even slightly, he acted swiftly and sometimes recklessly. He calls for Chandra again. This time the summons isn't whispered, it's thundered. You watch as Chandra appears before him, radiant but calm. He bows his aura, flickering like a candle in a breeze. You dishonor my house, Daksha declares. I follow the cycle you gave me. Chandra replies, I visit each daughter equally. I keep time. Daksha narrows his eyes, but you love only one. Ah, there it is. The quiet truth that burns hotter than any celestial fire. I don't deny it, Chandra says. You can almost hear the entire sky gasp. And now here comes your quirky tidbit. In some fringe traditions, it's said that Chandra carved Rohini's name into the sky using moonlight one letter a night over 27 days. Naturally, this caused even more drama among the sisters and was quickly outlawed by divine decree. Back in the chamber, silence hangs like incense. Daksha lifts his hand once more, but this time a chill passes through you because the curse he's crafting now is different. It's not just about dimming light, it's about dimming love. From this day forward, Daksha pronounces, your heart shall be torn between duty and desire. You may love her, but never fully. You may see her, but never stay. Each visit will be short. Each goodbye will ache. Chandra doesn't argue, he just bows. Historians still argue whether this myth symbolizes the emotional duality of the moon, its ability to soothe and sadden, to inspire poetry and madness alike. Some say it's a warning against favoritism, others a parable about divine restraint. But you see something else. You see a God choosing love even when it's incomplete. You float with him back into the sky. He resumes his journey one night with each sister, one fleeting moment with Rohini, no more, no less. But oh, how much can be said in a glance. Rohini waits every 27 nights. She doesn't cry, doesn't plead, just smiles when she sees him and touches her forehead in quiet devotion. And Chandra. He never dims when he sees her, not truly. Even when the curse pulls at his heart like an undertow, he shines, not for duty, but for her. You wake, or rather you drift into a sky that feels unusually quiet. Not in that peaceful, sleepy way, but in the way a room goes quiet when someone's left it. You search instinctively for Chandra's soft glow, but he's gone. Not absent, not late, just dark. The curse is completing its cycle. You float in the silence of the new moon, Amavasya they call it. A night when the moon retreats entirely from the sky, hiding behind its own shadow as though ashamed to be seen. And below, the world stirs uneasily. Without Chandra's light, things shift. The animals are the first to notice. You pass over a dense forest where owls refuse to hoot. Monkeys sit still in the treetops, tails curled around trembling bodies. Even the wind hushes as though the trees themselves are waiting. The villagers notice too. Here's your historical fact. Amavasya, the new moon, was traditionally considered inauspicious across much of India. Temples often dimmed their lights, ceremonies were postponed. Some communities wouldn't even travel at night. It was believed that evil spirits were strongest when the moon abandoned the sky. But the reality, you're watching it now. It's not that the moon is gone, it's that he's grieving. Chandra hides not from the world, but from himself. The full cycle has run its course, his forbidden love to his fiery curse, to Shiva's compromise and Daksha's second blow. The moon god is now locked in a rhythm of emotional contradiction. He shines, he dims, he disappears, and every part of it hurts. You find him in that shadowed corner of the cosmos, curled into a half-lotus, his glow folded deep inside his chest like a buried ember. I didn't think it would feel like dying, he says. You don't answer. What can you say to a god with a broken heart and a curse he can't escape? Instead, you just sit beside him. Sometimes silence is better than wisdom, your quirky tidbit. In some remote folk tales, it's believed that the moon spends Amavasya resting in Rohini's arms, invisible to the world. The lovers reunite in the dark, if only for a moment, before he must rise again and share himself with others. It's a beautiful lie. And like all beautiful lies, it comforts. But tonight, Rohini waits alone. You drift to her garden, now cloaked in darkness. No lamps, no singing girls, no anklets, just her sitting quietly under a tree, her eyes fixed on an empty sky. And then softly she speaks. I know you're still there, just those 5 words. And somehow across the dark heavens Chandra hears her. His silver glow doesn't return, not yet. But something stirs, a warmth, faint and flickering like a whisper made of candlelight. Back on Earth, the people adapt. Fishermen dock their boats, temple bells are stilled, mothers tuck children in early, warning them not to wander out under a moonless sky. But some don't fear the dark. You follow a lone priest to the edge of the river. He carries no lamp, no offerings. Just his voice. He sings a hymn to Chandra, slow and haunting, not to summon him, but to remind him that even when invisible, he is remembered. And that's the thing, isn't it? The moon never stops existing. He's just hidden, waiting. You return to Chandra once more. He rises slowly like someone relearning how to breathe. He opens his eyes, not yet glowing, but no longer dark. The cycle is about to begin again. And this time he rises not just because he must, but because she's waiting, and because you are too. The sky holds its breath. You drift through the darkness of a new night where nothing glows and everything listens. Then softly, shyly, light begins to return, a sliver, a whisper, a curved blade of silver barely scratching the edge of the sky. Chandra is coming back. Not in glory, not in haste, but with the kind of slowness that feels sacred, as if each flicker of light has to be coaxed from the void. You float beside him, watching as he exhales and his glow trembles into existence. This is the rebirth, not the dramatic fire and fanfare kind, but the quiet one, the one where gods rebuild themselves in pieces and the heavens stir with attention. The stars, who pretended not to notice his absence, blink in cautious welcome. The wind carries a hint of coolness again. Birds begin to sing just a little earlier, sensing that familiar glow returning to guide them. But below the world is still out of sync. Here's your historical fact. Ancient astronomers and priests relied on Chandra's phases to time their yagna's sacred fire rituals meant to nourish both gods and nature. A mistimed yagna could throw off entire seasonal cycles, crops might fail, rain might delay, and kings might lose favor with the divine. So a moon that doesn't behave, that's more than a curiosity, that's a crisis. And now the gods have had enough. You're summoned again to the celestial Sabha, the divine court of the heavens. This time it's tense, less debate, more side eyes. You can practically hear the cosmic equivalent of, this could have been an email. Agni is flaring. Indra is pacing. Vayu, the wind, God is literally vibrating. He's back, but slower, says one. Still favoring her, says another. Still breaking the rhythm, adds a third. Then comes the sigh. Brahma, the creator, ancient and weary, lifts his four faces to the gathering. It is time, he says, to call him. And you already know who they mean. Shiva. You feel him before you see him again. The clouds shift, the stars lean in. The silence becomes a presence. He arrives not with thunder, but with the quiet certainty of a mountain that has never needed to shout. He looks at Chandra, who hovers nearby like a disobedient student caught doodling during class. Shiva doesn't raise his voice. You are not broken, he says simply. You are just cycling, and that word, that single word, cycling, settles across the Sabha like warm rain after drought. You see the shift ripple through the gods. Maybe it's not disorder, maybe it's transformation. Here comes your quirky tidbit. In one obscure legend, Shiva tells Chandra that his phases represent the stages of a person's mind. Joy, sorrow, confusion, hope, so that humans watching the moon would never feel alone in their emotions. An ancient cosmic empathy glowing above their heads. Back in the mortal world, something stirs. You descend to a mountain-top temple carved into the cliffs of Himachal Pradesh. A priest climbs narrow steps before dawn, carrying nothing but a copper bowl and a bundle of sacred grass. He kneels as the moon's first crescent appears. He doesn't worship the full moon. He worships this one, the fragile return, the reminder that even loss has its own kind of beauty. And that brings us to Rohini. She hasn't seen him yet, not this new version. She stands on her balcony, hair-loose palms resting against a rail carved from starlight. When Chandra appears, still barely visible, her breath catches. "You're late," she says softly. He laughs a real laugh, soft, tired, but full. "I got lost," he replies, "in the dark." She lifts her gaze. "I waited anyway." And that's enough. Historians still argue whether the Chandra cycle was meant as scientific explanation or emotional metaphor, but you floating beside this quiet reunion know the truth. It's both. The science explains the light, the story explains the ache. Chandra drifts closer, careful not to linger too long. Daksha's curse still coils like a chain around his timing, but before he must move on, he lets one moment linger, just one, enough to light Rohini's cheek, enough to warm your chest. And then he moves on, but this time with grace. Because now the cycle has meaning. Now the moon isn't just returning, he's becoming. You rise again with Chandra, and tonight there's something different in the way he moves. It's not faster, not brighter, but there's rhythm now, a gentle confidence in the glide of his path across the sky. He's no longer resisting the cycle, he's dancing with it. You float just behind him, trailing his silver glow like a ribbon of moon thread across a sleeping world. He doesn't look back. He doesn't need to. He knows Rohini is watching. He knows the earth is waiting. And up ahead, Mount Kailash. You know where you're going? Chandra is returning to Shiva. You arrive at the sacred peak where time folds like origami and wind doesn't dare howl. Shiva sits in silence, wrapped in snake's moonlight and the occasional cosmic smirk. A crescent moon already rests on his head, glowing faintly, the symbolic crown of the cycle. Chandra lands softly on the stony plateau. He bows, not because he must, but because, well, some gods just deserve a bow. "You understand now?" Shiva asks without opening his eyes. Chandra nods. "I do." And you believe him, because you've seen him break, and you've seen him rebuild. Shiva opens one eye. The crescent on his brow pulses. "I cannot take away the curse," Shiva says, "but I can give you a purpose." Chandra tilts his head, glowing a little more purpose than love. Shiva chuckles low, like distant thunder playing a joke only the Himalayas understand. Love is personal. Purpose is eternal. And here it is, your historical fact. In post-Vedic mythology, Chandra's role expanded beyond romance and light. He became the lord of plants and Soma, the sacred nectar. Ancient Ayurvedic texts state that medicinal herbs gain potency when harvested under specific moon phases, especially during the waxing moon. Chandra was no longer just a god of glow. He became a healer. Shiva rises slowly like a glacier, remembering how to move. He reaches toward Chandra and places a glowing hand over his heart. No lightning, no dramatic transformation, just a pulse, a single beat of shared silence. "You will still wane," Shiva says. "I know, you will still be cursed. I accept that." But now Shiva continues, "You will be worshipped because of the cycle, not in spite of it." And there it is. The burden becomes a blessing. You feel it spread through Chandra like warm moonlight, sinking into soil. a quiet radiance, no longer desperate for fullness, no longer afraid of darkness, just present. Your quirky tidbit for the night. In many South Indian temples, there's a practice of offering moon rice during the waxing phase, a dish cooled with ghee curd and mint meant to pacify the mind and calm Chandra within the self. Devotees believe that eating it under moonlight can ease heartbreak. Is it science? Who cares? It's delicious and poetic. Back on Earth, things are changing. You float across riverbanks where monks chant Chandra Gayatri mantras designed to align human emotion with the moon's rhythm. In the jungles, tribal healers crush moon-bathed herbs to treat fever and fear. In palace courtyards, queens time their perfumes and potions to the full moon's height. And in Rohini's chamber, she writes, not letters, not poems, not prayers, just words drawn with sandalwood ink on soft banana leaves. Words she'll never send, words Chandra will never read, but she writes them anyway. Because love, like the moon, doesn't always need to be complete to be real. Historians still debate whether this myth was invented to make sense of natural cycles or to spiritualize heartache. Was it astronomy disguised as romance, or romance disguised as astronomy? Maybe both, maybe neither, but you're floating beside a god who now knows who he is, not because he is constant, but because he isn't. Chandra takes to the sky once more, his light pulsing steady. He is not full, not yet, but he is enough. And tonight, that's all the world needs. The sky tonight is soft as silk. You float beside Chandra as he glides over the sleeping world, more certain now in his movement, more whole despite the fragments. His light is generous again, casting silver across mountain tops, treetops, rooftops. People below may not know his story, but they feel the shift, the return. The first full moon since his curse is just a night away. But tonight is special. Tonight is the eve of wholeness. You follow Chandra as he drifts low over the Ganges. Below, the banks are lined with clay lamps, their flames flickering like shy fireflies. Women in saris the color of marigolds wade into the sacred water, cupping their palms to catch moonlight. Men chant near temple steps. Children release garlands downstream, watching petals float toward the sea. This is not just worship. This is celebration. Here's your historical fact. The night before the full moon, Treyodashi in the Hindu lunar calendar, was often seen as a time of transition, a bridge between absence and fullness. In some regions, it was believed that spirits were most active on this night just before the moon's power peaked, so people stayed up. They danced, they fasted, they prayed, and Chandra, he watches, not with vanity, not with pride, but with awe. You sense his hesitation. Fullness once meant danger, desire, disruption. Now it means return, ritual, rhythm. But still some part of him flinches at the thought of reaching that peak again. He remembers Daksha's curse. He remembers the sisters' glares. He remembers what it felt like to love too much and shine too brightly. And then he remembers Rohini. You drift beside her now. She's lighting a lamp. No elaborate offerings, no gold, just oil wick and breath. She places it on her windowsill and whispers, "You don't need to stay, just let me see you." And far above, Chandra hears your quirky tidbit. In a few lesser-known folk tales, it's said that on this night, if you place a mirror under moonlight and whisper your lover's name into it, Chandra will carry it to them in their dreams. Naturally, this resulted in generations of confused dreams and a lot of broken mirrors. but the tradition lingers in love-struck villages even today. You float over a valley where monks sit in silent meditation, their shaved heads glowing faintly in the moonlight. Not a word is spoken, but their stillness sings. One of them raises his face, skyward lips moving silently. He is not praying to Chandra, he is synchronizing with him, because now it's not about glory, it's about resonance. Back in the heavens, Chandra hovers at the edge of his fullest self. You can see the light swell in him, not explosively, but like a breath being slowly held. He turns to the stars who nod. Even the sun, distant, proud, and forever punctual, sends a flicker of approval. And Shiva watches, one hand resting on his trident, the other gently tapping a beat on his knee, as if to say, "Steady, steady." Now, Chandra lets go and rises. You feel it in your bones, in the roots of trees, in the waters of every river. His light floods the world, cool, soft, complete. The fullness isn't a flare of ego, it's a gift. He does not race toward Rohini. He does not linger too long. But he passes by, and when he does, her entire garden glows. You drift above them, both watching a love story that no longer needs proximity to survive. A glance is enough, a glow is enough. Historians still argue whether the full moon's emotional impact is rooted in myth or biology. Is it the increased luminosity that stirs our feelings, the tidal pull on our minds, or something else older, softer, moonlit and inexplicable? You don't care, because tonight Chandra is whole again, and so in a way, are you. The night after the full moon feels like an exhale. You drift alongside Chandra as he begins to wane again, not dimmed by punishment this time, but by design. It's gentle, even beautiful. His light thins like lace, unraveling in the wind, each strand falling softly across the earth. But something tugs at your attention tonight. A thread, faint but persistent, winding down toward the world below. You follow it. It leads you not to a temple or a palace, but to something far more fragile, a hut, small, quiet, nestled at the edge of a forest. Inside, a mortal sits by the glow of a low oil lamp, writing. Not a king, not a priest, just a man with ink on his fingers and the weight of too many thoughts behind his eyes. A poet. His name is forgotten to time. Perhaps you'll dream it later, but for now you simply watch. He dips his quill into a pot of dark indigo and writes one word, Chandra. Over and over again. The moon, God's name, fills the page like a heartbeat, sometimes in praise, sometimes in protest, sometimes in questions no God could answer. You lean closer and catch a whisper. Why do you leave when I begin to understand you? Here's your historical fact. The moon has long been the muse of poets across cultures, Kalidasa in India, Libai in China, Sappho in Greece. In classical Sanskrit literature, Chandra was often portrayed as the patron of lovers and madmen, of poets and wanderers. He wasn't just a light in the sky, he was the feeling behind every unfinished verse. The poet in the hut writes late into the night, not for fame, not even for answers, just to release the ache of watching something beautiful change again and again. And Chandra. He listens, not with words but with presence. He floats just above the forest, hovering near the thatched roof, casting a pale glow through the single window. The poet looks up, startled. He wasn't expecting a response, but the response isn't a miracle, it's just light. The poet bows his head and smiles, tears running silently into his beard. I thought I was alone in this. Chandra glows a little warmer, because even gods like to be understood. Now for your quirky tidbit. In a fringe Kashmiri tale, it's said that Chandra once fell so in love with a mortal poet that he gave him moon eyes, a condition where the man's pupils glowed faintly in the dark. Naturally, the poor fellow was chased out of multiple villages for looking too inspired. Still, he wrote the most haunting love songs of his era. Most of them ended with the same line, and the moon saw me. You drift from the poet's home heart a little heavier, but also fuller. Across the land others are stirred by moonlight too. A weaver ties silver threads into silk, whispering prayers for calmness. A widow places moonstones on her windowsill, hoping they'll absorb her grief. A young girl opens her diary and draws crescents in the margins, dreaming of someone who understands her quiet. And all the while Chandra moves, waning yes, fading yes. But with each retreating phase he becomes something more, part of them. Historians still argue whether the moon's role in artistic expression was imposed by culture or emerged from innate human longing. Is it a reflection of light or a projection of need? But you, hovering just behind the god himself, know the truth. Chandra has never asked to be worshipped. He only ever wanted to be seen. And now he is, not just in temples, not just in tales, but in ink, in longing, in verse. The poet sleeps now, ink-stained hands, folded on the table, the final line still wet. The moon loved once and never stopped. Chandra passes overhead and smiles. You float now toward a place soaked in scent and stillness, not a temple, not a forest, a palace. Not grand in scale, but exquisite in detail, carved ivory columns, silk curtains that dance even when there's no wind, and jasmine vines curling over marble railings like secrets that refuse to stay hidden. This is Rohini's palace, and tonight it's too quiet. You slip through a doorway left open by accident or fate, and find her where she always waits on the terrace. A shawl draped over her shoulders, fingers wrapped around a cup of warm spiced milk, face tilted upward toward a sky that barely holds any moon. Because Chandra is waning again. And each night he leaves, he takes a piece of her with him. She doesn't cry. That was a younger Rohini, the girl who waited on the balcony for hours, who whispered his name into incense smoke. No, this Rohini is older now, wiser, and strangely more in love. Because what she has with Chandra is no longer desire. It's devotion. Not the loud golden kind that asks for witnesses, but the quiet silvery kind that simply waits.
You stand beside her unseen and feel the ache. It's not sharp anymore, it's settled, like a familiar bruise that no longer hurts when touched. Here's your historical fact. In several ancient texts, Rohini was said to be Chandra's favorite, not just because of her beauty, but because of her patience. In the Mahabharata, she's described as the soft breath of the moon. Some scholars believe she represents not just romantic love, but loyalty, the kind that persists beyond presence. And she waits, even though the cycle is eternal, even though she knows he'll never stay, even though she can only have him for one night out of 27, she still prepares for that one night like it's the first. She oils her hair, she lays out rose petals, she places the jasmine garland on the cushion where he'll never sit. And then she watches the moon fade again. You feel her breath catch as he dims further tonight. And still no anger, no complaint, only a whisper, be safe.
Your quirky tidbit. In parts of Bengal, women used to tie silver threads around their wrists during certain moon phases, whispering the names of gods they loved. Rohini's name was whispered most often not as a goddess but as an example of the kind of woman who could love what was never fully hers. Tonight Rohini wanders the palace, not aimlessly ritually. Each room holds a memory, a glimmer of him. The couch where she once traced his constellation with her fingertip. The pool where his light once made the water shimmer like glass. The mirror that still catches his reflection even when he isn't there. You follow her through the long, quiet halls. She moves like the moon herself, slow, soft, inevitable. And somewhere along the way you realize something. Rohini's power is not in her proximity to Chandra. It's in her response to distance. She loves him as he is, cursed, changing, never hers for long, and that perhaps is the highest form of love. Historians still debate whether the myth of Rohini was created to emphasize feminine loyalty or to serve as an astrological anchor for seasonal rhythms. Was she a romantic symbol or a star chart instruction manual wrapped in a sari? But you see her in motion now, neither metaphor nor mythology, just a woman walking alone in a moonlit palace, refusing to stop loving someone who can never stay. And that refusal, that's sacred. You step outside again. The moon has nearly vanished now, just a faint arc barely holding onto the sky. But in Rohini's palace, every room still glows, because love here doesn't need a presence to endure. It just needs memory and a little bit of moonlight. The scent of cardamom and charcoal greets you tonight as you drift downward away from palaces and gods towards something far more grounded, more human. A market, but not the kind that buzzes with the clamor of midday commerce. No, this one comes alive after sundown. Tucked beside a lazy moon-fed river, the night market of this village is where stories breathe, where shadows bargain for stories and whispers are a currency more valuable than gold. You glide overhead. Flickering torches cast long silhouettes across the cobblestones. Merchants arrange silver jewelry that seems to hum beneath the moonlight. Women drape gauzy fabrics across one another's shoulders, laughing under their veils. Saffron cloves and fresh mangoes scent the air like a song half remembered. But tonight, the atmosphere carries a quiet reverence because the moon is waning, and everyone feels it. You slip between stalls unnoticed. A woman dips her fingers into a bowl of sandalwood paste and gently marks a crescent on her daughter's forehead. "Why, Amma?" the girl asks. "So Chandra sees you," she replies as though it's the most obvious thing in the world. And indeed he does. Even fading Chandra glows faintly above the canopy of woven tarps and cloth. The vendors don't ignore him. They lean into him. They arrange their goods so that what little light he gives strikes the brass bowls and moonstones just right. And in the corner of the market there's a man selling nothing but prayers. Not printed, not spoken, written, folded, tiny scrolls inked with moon blessings wrapped in red thread and tied to the wrists of the curious. You watch a young couple approach him, shy, barely touching. The man whispers something and the vendor smiles, handing them a scroll, stamped with the symbol of Chandra, a single curved line with a dot at its heart. "Say his name before sleep," he tells them. They nod, not fully understanding, but they will. Here's your historical fact. Moon worship, especially of Chandra, became deeply woven into folk traditions across rural India. Marketplaces like these often hosted moon rituals, informal ones where people would anoint their foreheads, share folk songs, or exchange blessed objects like silver rings and crescent pendants to ensure emotional clarity and peaceful dreams, because Chandra to them wasn't a story, he was a presence, your quirky tidbit. In a certain Gujarati tradition, brides weren't allowed to look at the full moon the night before their wedding, because it was believed Chandra's beauty might seduce their hearts away. A few legends say he did just that once or twice, though the documentation is sketchy and probably biased. But in this market tonight, no one avoids him. They invite him. The perfume seller sets out an extra bottle labelled Chandra-scented, and a blend of sandalwood night jasmine and a mystery note no one can quite identify. A fruit vendor arranges his apples in a spiral ending in a single white lotus because the moon likes symmetry.
Even a group of mischievous boys racing through the stalls pause for a moment to bow, just a quick bob of the head to the sky. And Chandra overhead flickers gently. He sees them, he sees all of them. And while his light is thin now, he gives what he has. Every last drop of it. Because being loved like this from marketplaces and temples, from Rohini and farmers and tired widows counting beads on a string, this is why he still rises, even when it hurts. You rise again with him, now leaving behind the glowing patchwork of the market. Below the music grows fainter, the incense cooler. But the prayers tied with red thread flutter in the wind, sending whispered hopes upward like kites. Chandra does not speak, but his silence says, "I'm listening." Always. You rise with a hush of drums beating somewhere far below. The moon is a crescent now, barely a blade of silver cutting through the dark, and yet tonight the earth pulses with movement. You drift toward the sound.
It's not music for dancing, it's rhythm for ritual. A moon festival is unfolding near the banks of a holy river, and you arrive just in time to witness the first torches being lowered into the water. Dozens of them, tiny leaf boats, each carrying a flickering flame, a bit of marigold and a drop of ghee. They float out across the river like stars adrift from the sky, carrying whispered prayers to the fading moon. And this time the prayers aren't begging for more light, they're giving thanks. This is Pitta Paksha, a time to honor ancestors. And here's your historical fact. In the Hindu lunar calendar, Pitta Paksha is a fortnight of ancestral remembrance, always falling during the waning phase of the moon. It is believed the moon as it recedes grows closer to the souls of the departed, becoming a bridge between the living and the dead. You float among the people gathered by the water. Men offer rice balls to crows, the supposed messengers of the beyond. Women chant their family lineages with steady voices and trembling hands. Children are quieter than usual, sensing the weight of memory in the air. All the while Chandra lingers above, dim but unwavering. His crescent light bends just enough to brush the surface of the river, causing it to shimmer, not with brightness, but with feeling. Because that's his new power, isn't it? Emotion, not illumination. Your quirky tidbit. In some remote parts of Tamil Nadu, there's a belief that if you bathe in moonlit water during Pitta Paksha and whisper the names of your ancestors, they'll whisper back in dreams that night. A few old-timers even swear they've gotten recipe corrections from long-dead grandmothers. Take that as you will. As the night deepens, the ritual intensifies. A high priest steps forward in his saffron robes, holds a conch shell to his lips and blows. The sound rolls across the hills like a wave of time folding in on itself. And then silence. Every eye lifts to the sky. To Chandra, even in his diminished state, he is the focal point of the night. The bridge, the listener. You rise beside him now, and he looks tired, but not weary. This is different. This is the tiredness of someone who has given everything and still chooses to rise. I used to think I was only meant to glow. He murmurs more to himself than to you. But now I see I was meant to reflect. And he does, not just light, but grief, gratitude, memory, love. You drift back down this time to a group of young monks sitting in a ring around a small fire. They are silent, eyes closed. One of them lifts a hand and recites softly, "O Chandra, son of sage Atri, ride your white horse and carry our words. Ride low near the river. Don't forget who we were. They are children, really, but they speak like elders. Because tonight the moon is a messenger, and the world a listening ear." Historians still argue whether the waning moon was associated with loss only after the rise of agrarian calendars, or if it was always seen as a symbol of departure. There are carvings in ancient caves where Chandra's crescent rests beside skulls, not as a grim image, but a gentle one, as if to say even death has its guardian light. You hover once more above the river where the last of the leaf boats drifts away, flames growing smaller and smaller until they disappear into the folds of water. The people rise. They do not cry. They do not look back. They simply leave the bank in silence, walking home under a sky where Chandra is barely there and yet somehow still enough. You follow him into the sky again. He's quiet. You are too. Because sometimes the most sacred stories are not those of power or glory. Sometimes they are made of soft things, a fading light, a whispered name, and the kind of presence that doesn't need to be loud to be eternal. The stars tonight are unfamiliar. You float high above the earth, higher than before, where the constellations shift like whispered riddles, and the air tastes old. Chandra moves slowly here, brushing through celestial corridors not mapped by ordinary sages or sky watchers. He is seeking something, or perhaps someone. You follow him across the dark dome of space where time stretches thin, and stories from distant lands wait to be remembered. Because Chandra, though born of Hindu myth, is not alone in his loneliness. And tonight, he is curious. He bends his path westward toward lands that have never spoken his name but have whispered their own versions of him. The first stop, Persia. Here's your historical fact. In ancient Persian mythology, Ma was the moon deity guardian of time and cosmic order. Though often overshadowed by the sun, god Ma was believed to record the passage of months and the fate of mortals. The Zoroastrians watched the moon's cycles with care, seeing its wax and wane as divine rhythm. Chandra passes over Persepolis, where ruins still murmur of rituals under the full moon. The stones remember. And further west, still Greece. Selene. You drift now through marble pillars and olive groves where poets once wrote odes to the goddess who rode a silver chariot across the night. She too loved a mortal Endymion, the sleeping shepherd eternal and unreachable, not unlike Rohini, in her tower. Chandra slows here. Something about Selene's story feels familiar. A divine being condemned to watch rather than touch. You feel his breath catch, but he doesn't linger. His path curves again, north now toward China. To Chang'e, the moon maiden who drank the elixir of immortality and floated away from her husband into the sky forever alone. In the mid-autumn festival, children light lanterns and stare up at her nibbling mooncakes and telling stories of sacrifice, separation, and longing. Chandra hovers above a lantern-lit village. The scent of tea smoke and sweet bean paste floats upward. He listens to a child's voice. Mama, does she miss him? The mother replies yes every night, but she watches over him even now. Chandra turns his face slightly. You sense something tightening in his chest. He is not the only one cursed to love from afar. Your quirky tidbit. In a tiny Himalayan village, there's an oral tale that Chandra once visited Greece in secret, leaving his own reflection in a spring where Selena used to bathe. For months afterward, the villagers swore the water shimmered with 2 moons. A visiting scholar called it optical nonsense. The villagers just smiled. You and Chandra rise higher past the whispers of myth into the silence between stars. And there spread across the black velvet of night is the proof that none of these stories are lost. They are etched in constellations. Rohini's name shaped into Taurus, Endymion asleep beneath Selene's path, a fox with a lantern, Chang'e's companion, glowing faintly among the stars. Historians still argue whether myths of moon deities evolved separately or spread through trade conquest or simple stargazing. Were they parallel dreams or cultural echoes bouncing off the firmament? But Chandra knows the truth. All those stories, their family. You drift beside him as he bows his silver head, not in sorrow, but in shared reverence. Because loneliness among the divine is never truly lonely. Not when it echoes across so many tongues, not when it lights so many skies, and not when mortals still look up night after night, wondering who, if anyone, might be watching back. Chandra continues his journey, not with urgency, not with sorrow, but with quiet solidarity. A flicker of moonlight moves from east to west, a thread stitching together the hearts of 1,000 cultures who never spoke the same language, but all looked up at the same glowing question. You follow that thread and smile, because suddenly the night doesn't feel so far apart anymore. The stars give way to clouds now, and the clouds give way to something warmer, earthier. You descend with Chandra, who is growing slimmer by the night, a crescent no larger than a smile drawn in candle soot. But his light, even dimmed, falls upon rooftops' windowsills and unexpectedly a classroom, a very old classroom. You arrive in Takshashila, an ancient seat of learning where scrolls, herbs, and sacred diagrams outnumber soldiers and swords. It's night, yes, but here learning never sleeps. A young student sits cross-legged in the soft lamp glow, reading under a narrow skylight that perfectly frames the moon. A teacher leans over him. Why not use the lamp? He asks gently. The student shrugs. The moon helps me think. The teacher smiles, doesn't press further, because everyone at Takshashila knows Chandra is not just a romantic god. He is a medicinal one. Here's your historical fact. In ancient Indian medical texts, particularly in Ayurveda, the moon is said to cool the body, calm the mind, and influence the fluids within us. The famed physician Charaka even linked Chandra's cycles to sleep disorders and mental clarity. Moonlight wasn't just poetic, it was prescribed, and tonight you're watching that prescription in motion. The student, a healer in training, has a problem. A prince, somewhere in the city, is suffering from what the scrolls call excess fire, insomnia, fevers, agitation. No remedy has worked. So the student does something curious. He crushes pearls into a fine dust, mixes it with sandalwood paste, chants Chandra's name 3 times, not as a prayer, but as an invocation, then places the paste in a silver bowl and sets it outside to soak in moonlight. It glows faintly. He smiles. "You'll come through," he whispers. "You always do." And Chandra, even from his pale crescent form, he hears. You float behind the student as he carries the moon-charged mixture through alleyways, past sleeping dogs and swaying lanterns, toward the prince's chamber. Inside, the boy lies wide-eyed, breath-shallow, drenched in sweat. The room is too bright, the servants too frantic. The student says nothing. He simply smears the pearl sandal paste across the prince's temples, behind his ears and onto his wrists. The effect is almost immediate. The boy sighs, then breathes, then sleeps. You can feel the exhale ripple through the room, through the palace, through the very air, because Chandra's gift is not force, it's stillness. Your quirky tidbit. In certain medieval texts, pearl dust was thought to be solidified moonlight, especially when harvested from oysters found during the waxing moon. It was so revered that some healers carried small vials of it sewn into their robes in case of heartbreak or royal tantrums. Back in Takshashila, the student returns to the school courtyard. He looks up at Chandra and raises both palms in silent thanks, not for glory, for guidance. And you feel it too. How strange it is that a god who cannot touch still reaches so many, that a moon so far away can calm a racing heart, cool a fevered brow, or soften a prince's restless thoughts. Chandra continues his descent across the sky. His light grows thinner still, but not weaker. There is clarity in this narrow glow, like a whisper that says you're not alone in your sleeplessness. Below, the student begins to write again. This time, not formulas, but a poem, not for fame, not even for Chandra, just for himself. Because sometimes healing is science, and sometimes it's simply feeling seen by the night. You follow Chandra through a deepening sky, his glow now the barest crescent, a silver thread unraveling into night. He no longer shines, he suggests. Not a lantern, but a sigh, a quiet presence that only those who are truly looking can find. And tonight, someone is looking, not from a temple, not from a palace, but from a cave. Hidden high in the cliffs of the Aravalli Hills, you find an old woman crouched beside a stone table. Her fingers are long and calloused, her face carved with the kind of wrinkles that only come from decades of reading by moonlight. In her hands, she holds a small gemstone, opaque, pale blue. It gleams faintly under Chandra's dim glow. A moonstone. You feel the pulse of magic in the air, faint but insistent, like a memory, just out of reach. Here's your historical fact. Moonstones, known as Chandrakanta in Sanskrit, were prized in ancient India not just for beauty, but for their supposed connection to Chandra. It was believed that a true moonstone could absorb moonlight and radiate it back into the body, curing melancholy, madness, and even nightmares. Many Ayurvedic texts list it under cooling remedies for the mind and soul. Tonight, the old woman is preparing a remedy. She crushes dried lotus petals, stirs them into clarified butter, and places the moonstone in the mixture. Then she waits, allowing the stone to speak to the ghee. "I need your light," she mutters, almost chiding the stone. "Not your silence." Chandra flickers above, a little amused. She's always been impatient. You hover beside her as she opens a battered wooden box. Inside, dozens of stones, some pale, some milky, some cracked, from too many years of being asked for too many things. But this one still pulses. She picks it up, lifts it to the moon and holds it to her own forehead. A breath, a whisper. The lines on her face soften, her hands stop trembling, and for a moment, just a moment, you see her how she was. A younger version, laughing under full moons, running barefoot across palace courtyards, healing others before they even knew they were hurting. She was once a royal physician. Now she's the keeper of forgotten cures. And tonight her cure is for the mind. A boy from the village below has been crying in his sleep. Not from nightmares, but from remembering too much. His brother lost to war. His mother vanished in childbirth. The kind of grief that grows legs and follows you around long after the funeral garlands fade. The old woman doesn't ask questions when the boy's uncle arrives at the cave. She simply hands him a small bowl, glowing faintly with infused ghee and the essence of the moonstone. Before bed, she says, 3 nights, and if he still cries, she shrugs, then cry with him. But this will help. Your quirky tidbit. In fringe traditions of Assam and parts of Bengal, moonstones were thought to be formed by drops of moonlight that fell to earth during eclipses when Chandra, in a state of sorrow, wept into the ocean. These solid tears were gathered secretly by healers and smuggled into temples disguised as river pebbles. Back in the cave, the old woman watches the man leave. She exhales long and slow. "Too many people think you're only about lovers," she says aloud, glancing up. Chandra glimmers slightly, his sliver of light just touching her cheek in response. "You're more than that." And you know she's right, because love isn't always passion and poetry. Sometimes it's simply helping someone fall asleep without fear, helping a child feel safe in the dark, helping an old woman remember who she was. And now Chandra descends lower still. Just a breath remains before his light vanishes completely. But in the cave, the old woman lights a lamp made of pearl and silver. She places it at the mouth of the cave and hums a song without words. It glows with a borrowed light. Moonlight. And you drift upward even as Chandra fades, because even in his near absence, his presence lingers, in stone, in memory, in healing, in the soft hush of a night that understands you without needing to speak. You rise once more with Chandra, and this time there's barely anything left of him to follow. He's only a breath, now a thread of silver mist stitched to the edge of the sky. The world below can no longer see him, but you can. And more importantly, he still sees them. Tonight he's drawn somewhere unusual. You follow him to a forest clearing deep in the Vindhya hills. Wild and thick, this place is not home to temples or palaces. It belongs to something older, something forgotten. And yet here they are, a group of cloaked figures walking silently beneath the trees, carrying no torches, making no sound. They wear pendants carved with a crescent and a single teardrop, symbols you don't recognize, but Chandra does. They are his people. Or were. The moon cult, long gone from the pages of the sacred books, their names spoken only in whispers. But tonight they gather. Here's your historical fact. Archaeologists have discovered moon-aligned structures in remote parts of India that predate Vedic temples, simple altars made from stone aligned to catch the full moon's light at certain times of year. Though little is known about their worship, folklore suggests they honored Chandra not just as a god, but as a companion, a divine witness to human sorrow, joy, and silence. The cult believed that Chandra watched over those no one else saw, the lonely, the shunned, the forgotten. Those who wept in silence. Those who healed in secret. And tonight, his light, faint though it is, finds them once more. You watch as the figures gather around a circular platform made of quartz, worn smooth by centuries of bare feet. In the center, an old bronze bowl is placed, filled not with fire, but with water. They do not chant, they do not dance, they wait. and slowly the water begins to glow, just faintly, just enough. Because Chandra has arrived. Even in near darkness, even under curse, he gives them what he can. One woman steps forward. Her face is streaked with moon markings, ashes, and white pigment in the shape of crescents. She dips her hand into the glowing bowl and touches it to her forehead. "Thank you," she says. "That's it." 2 words. But Chandra glows slightly brighter, because sometimes a thank you offered in silence is more powerful than 1,000 mantras shouted from temple walls. Now your quirky tidbit. In a small, half-decayed folktale collected from a wandering bard in Odisha, it was said that there was once a temple that only opened on the darkest night of the month. No priests, no lamps, just a polished slab of obsidian where devotees would sit in silence and ask the moon for forgotten memories. Some claimed they saw past lives. Others swore the moon whispered their own names back to them. You move among the moon cult now, listening as they share stories softly, reverently. One speaks of a time Chandra lit the forest when her child was lost. Another remembers a fever, broken after she sat beneath his light for 3 nights wrapped in white cloth. A third simply says, "He kept me company when no one else did." And that's when it hits you. Chandra's greatest miracle wasn't his glow, it was his presence, his willingness to remain, to show up, to linger over rooftops, markets, battlefields, and bedsides, to watch over mortals not from above but beside them. As you drift higher again, you notice something odd. That bowl of water in the clearing, it still glows, even though Chandra's light has nearly vanished, and that glow spreads into the grass, the trees, the stones. Everything touched by moonlight holds on to a little of it, like a memory that refuses to fade. And the people below, they feel it. Even as the moon disappears, they do not despair. They do not call him back. They simply keep sitting, keep remembering, because they know what Chandra has only just learned. To be seen once truly seen is enough to light a soul for a lifetime. You float beside him now, and though his form is almost gone, you feel the strength in his silence. He is not vanishing. He is resting. Because even the gods need to be held sometimes. And tonight, the earth is holding him. The night has never been darker. You search the sky, but there is no silver sliver, no glow on water, no beam upon mountain top. Chandra has receded completely, vanished from sight, from sound, from sky. And yet, you feel him. Faint, yes, but still there, somewhere. You drift higher and higher until stars themselves seem to lean away as if making space for what's coming next, because tonight you're going to see something few have ever seen. You arrive at a space beyond the stars, a stillness at the edge of memory, where time doesn't move forward, only inward. Here, Chandra lingers in his hidden hour, a space between cycles, between endings and beginnings. And in this place, he writes, yes, you read that correctly, the moon god writes, but not with quill or scroll, no parchment, no ink. He writes in constellations, with gravity, with reflected light, with the quiet intention of someone trying to be remembered by the ones who forget his name. What he's writing is not a poem, it's a letter to her, to Rohini. Each star he selects is deliberate, each flicker a word, and soon you begin to see it form. A constellation, elegant, subtle, shaped like an open palm, fingers gently curved. At its center, a star blinks twice. The pulse of a heart, the pause of a goodbye. Here's your historical fact. Ancient astronomers often gave poetic names to constellations seen only during the dark moon. These hidden signs were reserved for sages and seers, those awake while others slept. Some texts refer to them as sky letters, divine messages from gods to mortals, visible only when nothing else glows. This is one of them, Chandra's message to Rohini etched in stars. He will never read it aloud, she will never trace it with her fingers, but still she will feel it, because love doesn't need to be delivered to be received. Now for your quirky tidbit. In one obscure Rajput legend, it's said that if a woman stares into a bowl of still water during a new moon and sees a shape that looks like a hand, her beloved is thinking of her from afar. Naturally, this led to an uptick in broken bowls and mysterious engagements during the 12th century. You hover beside Chandra now as he finishes the final curve of the constellation. It shimmers once, briefly, as if blinking a tear from the eye of the cosmos. And then, slowly, he begins to emerge again, just the faintest glow curled at the edge of his being. The cycle has begun its return, but not yet. There is still something left to do. You feel it before you see it. A ripple of joy. Below, in a quiet grove, beneath a banyan tree, a girl no older than 12 looks up. She doesn't know his name, doesn't know the myth, but she smiles at the empty sky as though she's meeting someone familiar. She hums a lullaby. Old, simple. It goes something like, "Come back when you're ready, come back when you can. Even if I can't see you, I'll know where you stand." Chandra hears it, not through ears, but through the soul thread that runs from sky to earth. That song wasn't meant for a god, but he takes it anyway, because when the world forgets to pray, sometimes it remembers to sing. You rise again with him, and just as his glow begins to return, a single secret shimmer, you look back. The constellation is already fading, but it doesn't need to stay, because it's done what it came to do. It said what needed to be said. I see you. I still love you. I'll return. And that's enough for her, for you, for him. Tonight, you drift through something different. Not myth, not memory, but museums. You descend into a cool, echoing gallery where glass cases hold time captive. Moon pendants, carved stones, fragments of scrolls, a broken clay oil lamp labeled Votive Offering, 5th century BCE, possibly lunar-related. The space smells of old paper and careful funding. People whisper as if their breath might damage the artifacts, but you're here to listen. And what you hear louder than the hush is debate. Two scholars stand at opposite ends of an exhibit titled Chandra God Metaphor, or Meteorology 1. A stern man with a blazer and a sharp laser pointer gestures toward a diagram showing lunar cycles overlaid with agricultural planting schedules. It's astronomy, not affection, he says. They created Chandra to explain the sky. Emotional overlay came later. The other, a woman with silver bangles and eyebrows that refuse to stay still, shakes her head. No, she counters. They felt him first. Then they explained him. You don't build shrines for metaphors. And just like that, your historical fact, scholars still argue whether moon deities were literal sky-tracking tools or spiritual reflections of the human psyche. Some say Chandra was a calendar with charisma. Others insist he was a companion in the dark first and always. You float between them as they continue. There's no archaeological proof of love stories in early Vedic records, Blazerman says. Because love doesn't fossilize, Bangle Woman fires back. Oof, that one lands. You drift onward into a room with less noise and more awe, a darkened dome with a projection of the lunar phases looping overhead. Beneath it, a bench, and on that bench a boy, maybe 10, knees pulled to his chest, watching the moon phases rise and fall above him. He doesn't notice the informational placards. He doesn't care about lunar tracking charts. He just whispers, "I like this one," as the crescent shape appears. You lean in. Why? Because it looks like he's smiling. You quirky tidbit. In 19th century colonial surveys of temple sites, some British officers dismissed moon worship as soft religion, too emotional, too feminine, too undisciplined. One even wrote, "The moon temples are largely decorative and serve no political function." That officer later resigned after developing an obsession with a local folk song about Chandra and a lotus. In the final gallery, you see a curved piece of obsidian labelled Rohini altar fragment. Next to it, a faded quote etched in tiny Devanagari script. You lean closer. He rose for everyone, but he paused only for her. There's no date, no source, no footnote. But you know it's real. Because that line, that's not a translation, that's a memory. As you rise back toward the sky, Chandra is waiting, thin, steady, rising once more. "They're still talking about me," he says with a soft smile. "They always will," you reply. He looks down toward the museum where the boy is still watching the crescent spin above him. "I like that one," Chandra says, "because it looks like you're smiling." He grins, "because it means I'm on my way back." And so he is. Not yet full, not yet finished, but seen, remembered, debated by scholars, sung to by children, and quietly, faithfully loved. You descend into a garden at dusk. The sky is softening into that pale indigo hour when the sun has left, but the moon has not yet arrived. The kind of moment poets love, the kind that asks for nothing but your stillness. And tonight, beneath the banyan trees, the poets are gathering. Not in a circle, not on a stage. They simply arrive, one by one, slipping through silken veils of hanging moss and moonflower vines. Their robes trail behind them like soft brushstrokes on the earth. They bring no instruments, only their voices. This is no performance. This is remembrance, because tonight is for Chandra. You settle near the roots of an ancient tree as the first poet begins her voice low and steady. "He rises when I grieve," she murmurs. Not to comfort, just to witness. No applause, just nods. Another takes her place. He whinnies, and I remember, you don't need to be full to be enough. And there it is, your historical fact. In classical Sanskrit literature, Chandra was revered not only as a celestial body, but as a patron of the arts. Poets like Kalidasa and Bhavabhuti often invoked him as a symbol of longing, change, and inspiration. His waxing and waning became metaphors for desire, decay, and divine patience. The next poet is older, with a silver beard and voice like unraveling silk. I asked him once, "Why do you always leave?" He answered, "So you'll write about my return." They all smile. Not because it's clever, but because it's true. Your quirky tidbit. In some medieval poetic courts, it was considered unlucky to begin a new verse during the dark moon phase unless the poem was about Chandra. Only his name was believed to bring light into the empty space. Scribes would even draw tiny crescents in the margin so the verse wouldn't feel alone. Now, a younger voice speaks. A boy, barely more than a teen, steps forward. "My mother died when the moon was gone. So now I wait for it to come back before I forgive the world." There's silence. Then the group rises not to leave, but to form a loose line along the edge of a pond. Each one kneels, each one whispers something toward the water. And you realize they're not reciting poems anymore, they're offering them. You glance at the sky. The crescent has returned, just a sliver, barely there, but present. You turn to Chandra, who now floats just above the trees, low enough to kiss the top of the banyan branches. They're giving you their verses, you say. No, he replies, they're returning what was always mine. Because that's the secret, isn't it? Chandra doesn't just inspire poetry. He is poetry. The curve of him, the cycle, the ache of knowing he'll leave, but come back. Every poet, from dusty scrolls to anonymous lovers scribbling verses into the margins of old books, has whispered his name without even realizing. He does not speak in stanzas. He is the stanza. You float above the garden, now the words still echoing beneath you, sinking into soil and lily pads and the cool stone steps of the pond. Chandra continues his slow climb through the sky. The poets remain in place, each watching in their own way. One lies down on the grass, one cups water in their palm and drinks, one simply cries. But none are empty, because Chandra, though quiet, has filled them. Historians may still argue about his role, astrologers may chart his every move, but the poets, they feel him. And tonight, as always, he gives them just enough light to keep writing, just enough darkness to keep needing him, and just enough silence to make room for a verse. The night smells of salt and mist. You float now over the sea, where Chandra's reflection stretches across the water in a broken ribbon of silver. He's almost half full again, rising steadily, calmly, like someone who no longer apologizes for their return. The ocean has always been one of his oldest companions. Not because it listens, but because it responds with tides. You drift beside Chandra as he watches the waves. No fanfare, no prayers tonight, just the endless motion of water and the pull of something ancient between them. Here's your historical fact. The connection between the moon and ocean tides was well understood in ancient India, even if not scientifically explained. Vedic seers recognized the moon's influence over water, especially during eclipses and full moons. The word samudra, ocean, is often linked with Chandra in early texts, implying a divine relationship between the two. And tonight, that relationship is humming. Below you, fishermen steer wooden boats into deeper waters. Their nets are draped loosely, their hands steady from years of reading, not maps, but moons. They say he's almost halfway, one whispers, squinting upward. A good night for silverfish, says another. They do not use charts or compasses. They use Chandra. You follow them as they cast their nets, each movement part of a long choreography between man and moon. One young fisherman, barefoot hair, still wet from prayer, leans over the side of his boat and stares at the water. He sees the moon's reflection wavering there and whispers, "Show me what I've forgotten." Chandra does not reply, but the tide shifts, and something in the water glows, not a fish, not a star, a shell, opalescent, pale blue, glimmering faintly as it's scooped into the boy's palm. He holds it to his ear and closes his eyes. You lean in, nothing, no sound. Then a heartbeat, faint, rhythmic, the sound of his mother's lullaby, the one she used to hum while braiding his hair before his first boat ride, long gone now, but somehow remembered. Your quirky tidbit. Some coastal communities believe that during crescent moon phases the sea whispered forgotten memories into the shells scattered along the shore. Children would collect them, press them to their ears, and insist they could hear stories of lost siblings, forgotten gods, or dreams never told aloud. The boy kisses the shell and slips it into his satchel. He doesn't need an explanation. Some magic doesn't come with footnotes. Above, Chandra watches. He does not boast. He does not shimmer, but he remains. And the sea responds again, waves curling inward, nets tightening with fish. Not too much, just enough. Because Chandra doesn't flood. He draws things upward, dreams, tears, truths. Even now he's pulling the boy's heart toward healing without ever touching it. And that's what he's always done. From Rohini's chamber, to the poet's ink, to the healer's pearl dust, to the ocean's tide, Chandra doesn't fix. He pulls you toward yourself. You float back upward as the boats begin to return. No one says thank you. No one bows. They simply glance once more at the sky and smile slightly. That's all he needs. Historians may chart tidal mechanics, physicists may track gravitational force, but you just watched a god whisper comfort into salt and bone. And you know this has nothing to do with science, and everything to do with grace. The moon is fuller tonight. You rise with Chandra once more, his glow no longer hesitant, no longer shy. He's just past the halfway point, waning behind him, fullness ahead, and this in-between state suits him. He's not trying to prove anything now, he's simply being. And tonight you're heading somewhere unexpected, a rooftop, flat, quiet, modern. You descend with him over a sprawling city, concrete glass neon pulses below, but above someone waits. Alone on a yoga mat with a mug of something warm steaming beside her. She's not here for Instagram, she's not even meditating, she's just looking up and writing. On her laptop screen, the cursor blinks beside a title, Why We Still Look for the Moon. You float beside her as she types, not a scholar, not a priestess, just a tired human trying to explain a feeling. Here's your historical fact. Even in contemporary India, despite urbanization and light pollution, Chandra remains embedded in cultural rhythms. His phase dictates religious festivals, menstrual tracking, farming practices, and even wedding dates. In cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and Chennai, you'll still find people who check lunar apps before signing contracts or planting balcony herbs. She's one of them, well, sort of. She doesn't garden, she writes. And tonight she's writing about him, about a moon god she vaguely remembers from bedtime stories. A myth she once dismissed as pretty superstition. But now she's not so sure. He doesn't glow the same way anymore, she types. Maybe because I'm different. Maybe because I finally see what he's been doing all along. She sips her tea. Rooibos and clove. You'd like it. She continues. I thought gods were about power, thunder, miracles. But this one he just shows up, night after night, changing, leaving, returning. You feel Chandra pause in his path. Just briefly, he's listening. Your quirky tidbit. In a recent social media trend, teens in Kolkata have started a new Moon Notes group where they write anonymous letters to Chandra and drop them in a sealed jar on their balconies. Most say they don't believe in it, but someone still empties the jars every month, and no one's asked who. Back on the rooftop, the woman leans back on her hands. I wonder, she says aloud, if he's tired. Chandra doesn't answer, but his glow sharpens ever so slightly, catching the curve of her cheekbone, the ring on her finger, the fine gold thread in her sweater. And she smiles, because sometimes the answer isn't words. It's presence. She closes her laptop without saving. Some things aren't meant to be published. Some are meant to be felt. You rise with Chandra again, this time over rooftops where satellite dishes blink and laundry flaps in a slow wind. In one window, a woman brushes her hair by moonlight. In another, a man folds prayer cloths he hasn't used in years. No one prays to Chandra, but they all look up. And that is its own form of devotion. Historians still argue whether modern people need myths like Chandra, whether gods have become obsolete in a world of apps and algorithms. But you know better. Because no app can comfort like a moonbeam through curtains. No calendar can whisper, "I'm still here." And no amount of logic can explain why on a rooftop with nothing to gain a woman closes her eyes and mouths, "Thank you." Chandra says nothing, but his glow lingers for an extra heartbeat before he moves on. Because maybe that's his greatest miracle of all. He never stays. But he never stops coming back. The sky is velvet tonight. Deep quiet, heavy with stardust and the soft breath of nearing sleep. You float higher, rising with Chandra as he begins to round into his final fullness, a complete circle of light so soft it doesn't shine. It soothes. There's no drama tonight, no angry gods, no jealous sisters, no curses or rituals. Just the moon, complete, quiet, present. You've seen him dim. You've seen him broken. You've watched him glide through temples, markets, forests, and bedrooms. You've followed him as he wrote love into the stars and sorrow into stone. And now you're here, at the top of the cycle, where light and memory merge, where love, even unfinished, becomes whole. Down below, Rohini sits on her balcony, older now, her hair streaked with silver, her hands lined from years of waiting. But tonight she doesn't wait. She watches, not with hunger, with peace. She smiles when she sees him, not because she hopes he'll stay, but because she knows he'll leave and come back. That's how you know it's real. Here's your historical fact. Many full moon festivals like Sharad Purnima and Guru Purnima celebrate not abundance but awareness. They're about the completion of a cycle, yes, but also about embracing transience. The full moon in Indian tradition is not a destination. It's a pause, a breath before beginning again. You hover beside Chandra as he looks down at the world, at the fields flooded with moonlight, at the river banks glowing like liquid mirrors, at the windows cracked open just enough to let him in. He sees a mother singing to her newborn, a widow whispering names into the folds of her shawl, a child drawing crescent moons in the fog on a window pane. They don't know his full story, but they feel it. Because his glow isn't light, it's memory. And as you float with him, silent whole, you realize something. He never needed to be rescued. He never needed the curse undone. He only needed to be understood. Your quirky tidbit. In some folk traditions, moonlight during Sharad Purnima is said to carry healing nectar, amrit, which falls in invisible drops on those who sleep outdoors. Some families still lay out white sheets in courtyards on full moon nights, believing the cloth will absorb the moon's sweetness. The next morning, they wrap themselves in it. You smile because that's what this entire journey has been, not about gods, not about punishment, about sweetness, quiet, cyclical, slow, and deeply human. You look at Chandra. He doesn't speak, but you know what he'd say. "Thank you for watching me."
Even when I was fading, especially then. And then he exhales. The glow softens. The wind stills. And the sky begins its descent into shadow, but you're not afraid. You know now what Rohini knows. what the poets, healers, and children know. He will come back, he always does. And now, as the moon rises into its final arc of light, you feel your breath slowing. The world turns quietly beneath you, wrapped in silk and sleep, while the stars blink in long, lazy intervals like eyelids about to close. You feel your shoulders soften. The tension you've been carrying, the questions, the worries, the noise of waking life, releases gently like a tide pulled back by the moon himself. Chandra is high now, steady, no longer growing, no longer dimming, just glowing. Not for ceremony, not for spectacle, but for you. Let him cast his cool light across your thoughts, smoothing their edges. Let him drip soft silver into the cracks of your day, filling them with peace. There is no need to chase answers now, no need to revisit the beginning. You've followed the whole cycle. You've floated through love, longing, silence, poetry, and return. You've watched a god fall, rise, and understand himself not through perfection, but through presence. And now you lie beneath him, held by that same presence. Whole, seen, enough. Let the sky fold around you. Let the moon be your lullaby. And let this story rest not with an ending, but with a promise. He'll return. He always does. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.